October 23, 2025, will stand as one of the most brutal dates in North American auto industry history, and one General Motors would erase in a heartbeat if it could. For years, the Detroit powerhouse acted like Canada would fold the moment real pressure arrived, but after collecting billions in public subsidies and then backing away from its promised electric vehicle future in Ontario, GM got a wake-up call it didn't see coming. Canada is no longer interested in empty promises, and this time it pushed back. October 23, 2025 became one of those dates the North American auto industry won't forget anytime soon, and if General Motors had the power to wipe a single day from the calendar, this would probably be the one. For years, the company operated with a kind of quiet arrogance, convinced that Canada would do what it had always done when pressure mounted: complain a little, then fall in line. But after taking billions in public money and then walking away from its much-hyped electric future in Ontario, GM ran into a reality it clearly never planned for. Canada had stopped bluffing. Inside Detroit, the assumption was simple. Canada, like so many smaller partners in the orbit of American industry, would make noise, issue statements, maybe vent some frustration, and then surrender to the usual corporate script. GM believed it had room to maneuver because it always had room to maneuver. The company had already collected enormous public subsidies to transform the CAMI plant in Ingersoll into a symbol of the EV era. BrightDrop, the electric delivery van project, was supposed to represent something bigger than a product line. It was sold as proof that Canada could stand at the front edge of the electric transition. Then the market cooled, demand fell short, and GM did what giant corporations so often do when projections stop flattering the boardroom. It pulled back. The first sign was the production suspension near the end of 2025. Then came the silence, cold, strategic, and telling. By April 2026, that silence turned into finality when news broke that the shutdown would be permanent. More than 1,200 workers were left staring at the wreckage in a town of only 14,000 people. That wasn't a routine business decision. It was an economic detonation. Families who had built their lives around that plant were suddenly told there was no second act coming, no recovery period, no restart on the horizon, just an ending. GM's top brass returned to Michigan thinking the fallout would be manageable. Maybe some angry press coverage, maybe a few formal objections, maybe another round of public outrage that would burn hot for a week and then disappear. That was the miscalculation, because this time the reaction was different. At Unifor, the country's auto workers' union, nobody needed time to understand what had happened. They had watched this pattern repeat itself for years. Multinational corporations take public money, make sweeping promises about jobs and innovation, and then vanish the second the numbers stop looking pretty on a quarterly earnings sheet. The playbook was familiar. What changed was the response. Within 72 hours of GM's announcement, Ottawa made clear that this would not be handled with soft language and closed-door pleasantries. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly and Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne hit back with a move that sent shockwaves through boardrooms across the region. Canada cut GM's duty-free vehicle import quota by nearly a quarter. That wasn't symbolic, that was surgical. Every American-built GM vehicle entering the Canadian market was suddenly exposed to punishing retaliatory costs. Overnight, models like the Chevy Silverado and Cadillac Escalade became far more expensive tool and north of the border. Stellantis got hit too. After shifting Jeep production into Illinois, it saw its own import privileges slashed by half. This wasn't political theater. It was a targeted, legally structured response to what Ottawa viewed as a broken commitment. To understand why panic started spreading inside GM's Detroit offices, you have to go back to 2022, when the promises were still fresh and the cameras were still rolling. That was when billions were committed to Ingersoll with the promise of building Canada's first major EV manufacturing hub. BrightDrop wasn't marketed as a side venture. It was framed as the future itself. Workers retrained, communities bought in, careers were reorganized around this supposed transformation. GM accepted the funding, embraced the applause, and let everyone believe the future had already been decided. So when the company later described the 2025 halt as merely temporary, people wanted to believe that two workers waited. They stood outside plant gates, hoping that the pause would turn into a restart, that someone somewhere would finally give them a reason to trust the company again. That moment never came. By early 2026, uncertainty had turned into anger, and anger into grief. Unifor President Lana Payne captured what thousands were feeling. Workers had given years of their lives to GM, and in return they got indifference. But that is where the story stops being just another industrial heartbreak and becomes something much bigger, because Ottawa had been building something behind the scenes, an enforcement mechanism that insiders began referring to as the auto punishment framework. The name sounds bureaucratic, almost dull. In reality, it was a weapon. Under that system, vehicles made in the United States could be hit with a 25% tariff unless the automaker honored its job and investment promises in Canada. Keep your commitments and the penalty disappears. Break your word and the consequences arrive automatically. No endless negotiations, no years of delay, no room to hide. Behind polished corporate language, on October 23rd, the Canadian government formally declared that GM and Stellantis had breached binding agreements. The effect was immediate. Suddenly, GM's margins in Canada started collapsing. Dealers and executives across the border began scrambling. Calls started flying from Michigan and Ohio as people realized the financial damage wasn't theoretical anymore. Then Joly sent Stellantis an unmistakable warning: live up to your commitments or Canada would move to recover. Every dollar it had handed over, GM got its own brutal message in a private meeting. The company had 15 days to produce a legitimate plan for Ingersoll, not another vague assurance, not another PR line, but a real schedule backed by real accountability. That was the moment GM discovered how exposed it really was. There was no safety net, there was no elegant detour. Bright drop inventory in the United States wasn't exactly overflowing, and every substitute vehicle sent into Canada now came wrapped in a 25% penalty. A truck that once landed at $45,000 was now arriving closer to $56,000. That difference changes everything. Buyers hesitate, dealers panic. Stock starts backing up, and while Asian and European rivals moved without the same self-inflicted burden, GM found itself trapped by a crisis of its own making. This is where the irony becomes impossible to ignore. Trade conflicts are usually sold to the public as measures to defend national industry, but in this case, American automakers help trigger the very pressure now crushing them. Consumers pay more. Delivery timelines get worse. Corporate planners are forced back to the drawing board. What looked like a clean exit from Ontario quickly began to look far more expensive than staying. And beyond all the spreadsheets, tariff math, and executive calls, there is still the part of the story that matters most. The worker who gave 10 years to the CAMI plant and suddenly has no paycheck. The family in Ingersoll trying to figure out what happens next when the economic anchor of the town disappears. That is why this response matters. Canada is sending a message that public money is not a blank check and workers are not disposable props in a corporate press release. What happened next made that message even louder. Within weeks of the tariff escalation, Detroit's posture began to shift. Ford started revisiting its own assumptions. Stellantis moved leadership around. GM, which had acted like the book was closed, quietly reopened communication about returning to Ingersoll. The calculation had changed. Living under permanent tariff punishment was starting to look less attractive than honoring the commitments they had tried to escape. That is why this moment matters far beyond one plant or one company. It marks a deeper shift in how Canada is choosing to defend its own economic future. For decades, workers were told there was no alternative: accept whatever the corporation demands, or watch the jobs disappear to another country. Accept less pay, less leverage, less certainty, or lose everything. That logic is now being challenged. Ottawa is showing that policy can do more than issue statements. It can create consequences. It can force multinationals to take commitments seriously. And that matters not just to automakers. Every global company watching from the sidelines, whether in aerospace, semiconductors, or pharmaceuticals, can now see the pattern. Canada is signaling that access to public support comes with obligations, and those obligations are enforceable. This is not some anti-business crusade. It is a declaration that sovereignty still has meaning and that workers cannot be abandoned without cost. Ingersoll has now become more than a plant. It has become a test case for a much larger question. Does a country actually have the will to defend its own economic dignity when corporate giants try to rewrite the terms? By setting a hard 15-day deadline, Joly showed that protection does not have to be symbolic. It can be measurable. It can be disciplined. It can change behavior. By November, the logic inside the boardrooms had flipped. Remaining in Canada no longer looked like a burden. It looked like the rational choice, and unlike the chaotic trade warfare of past eras, this model offers something corporations fear and respect in equal measure: clarity. The rules are visible, the consequences are real, and, for the first time in a long time, Canadian workers are seeing what it looks like when a government is willing to use every tool it has. For years, they were told to settle, to absorb the losses, to believe that power always belongs somewhere else. That era is beginning to crack. Canada is no longer functioning as Detroit's obedient backlot. It is acting like a country with its own leverage, its own red lines, and its own willingness to enforce them, and that changes the balance of power across the entire North American industrial map. If this is only the opening move, then what comes next could be even bigger. So stay close, because this economic fight is far from over and the next chapter may hit even harder. If you want sharp daily breakdowns on stories like this, hit the bell and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.